To start off with, let me ask a quick question. Which do you think is safer? A multi-engine airplane, an airplane with 2 engines, or an airplane with 1 engine?
Let's say
2. Totally wrong. You would think that would be the case, but statistics show that a single-engine airplane is safer than a twin-engine airplane. Why do you think that is? It all has to do with performance. So let me talk about that for a second. Naturally, this isn't a twin-engine airplane, but when you lose an engine in a multi-engine aircraft, you've just lost 50% of your performance. Do you think that's a correct statement? You actually lose 80 to 90% of your performance. So the thing that's happening when you lose an engine, if you've got an engine here and an engine here, and this one goes out, the plane's going to want to go like this. A lot of thrust that way, nothing there, just drag. So the pilot has to step on the rudder to keep the airplane flying, has to have the right nose up and down attitude in order to get the best performance out of it. There's a saying in the airline community that when an engine goes out in a multi-engine aircraft, it just postpones the accident down the road because you've just lost 80 to 90% of your performance. So things get very complicated when you lose an engine in a twin. You've got to be on top of it precisely, because if you don't catch it right away, a lot of people have basically spun in by not putting the proper rudder in, not having the right nose up or down attitude. And so their airspeed gets low and they keep feeding the rudder in. And if they don't have that nose attitude just right, and it gets below a certain speed, it's the only thing it can do is roll over and crash. So training in a multi-engine airplane is imperative for an emergency like that, especially because you lose so much performance. You wouldn't think that would be the case. You would think 1 engine gone, 50% loss. But with the drag and having having all the aerodynamic drag on the plane to keep it flying, that's what degrades your performance. So let's think about this for a second. If you don't know how to handle that situation, again, the thing that's going to happen is it's going to roll upside down on you. Whereas a single engine airplane, as well as it's going to fly straight, and you pick a place to land and you land. So let's talk about training here, because that's what we're talking about here with aviator training. Last session, we talked about correct principles and how important it is to follow correct principles. That was the first part of aviator training. And if you haven't noticed by now, aviator training spells the word captain, C-A-P-T-A-I-N. The C stands for correct principles. The A stands for attitude. That's what we're going to talk about tonight, is attitude. The next one is planning, then training, analyzing, risk management, and navigation. We can learn so much about life and how to become successful by applying the principles associated with aviator training. So let's look at what we talked about with the multi-engine airplane. We've lost one engine, our performance has been cut to 80 to 90%. And again, if we don't handle it properly, this one's going to produce a lot of thrust, this one a lot of drag, and the plane's going to roll over and crash. So again, that's why single engine airplanes, you lose an engine, and it's just going to glide straight ahead. So the only thing a twin's going to do with an engine out is just extend your glide a little bit further. But the problem is, a lot of people don't keep up on their training. And that's where attitude comes in. Let me share a quick experience with you. When I was a fairly new flight instructor, and I've had my multi-engine instructor certificate for just a short time. Luckily, there was myself and one other passenger on this particular flight. We were at the Provo airport, did all the run-up, checked everything out, the engines looked good, everything was running properly. And so we took off. We made a left turn, and the guy that was in the right seat looked at the right engine and he said, "There's oil pouring out of this engine." And so I looked over, and sure enough, the whole nacelle on the engine was covered in oil. So the first thing, I pulled the power back on that engine, and we monitored the oil pressure on it. That gave enough time to go through the emergency procedure. Luckily, we had enough altitude, and we were able to shut the engine down, come back around, and make a landing. What if that would have happened as soon as we lifted off? That's where things get really difficult, because you've got full power on both of those engines. You've just lifted off and you're slow. In the airlines, we train for that over and over and over. But as a private pilot, you really don't do much of that. There's not a real requirement to do it. So a lot of people get lax in their training. And that's why multi-engine airplanes are not near as safe as a single-engine airplane. So let me talk about the airlines for a second. Every 6 months, they put us in a simulator, and they always do what's called a V1 cut. V1 is basically a decision speed, and we're going to talk more about that in the session where we talk about risk management and how to handle risk. Again, the thing I love about simulators is you can practice all of this in the safety of the simulator. So V1 is decision speed. When we're rolling down the runway, the non-flying pilot calls V1. That's a set speed that we figure out with the load in the airplane. That means that once that speed is called, our decision's made, we're flying. No ambiguity whatsoever. In other words, V1 and a little bit past, and the engine quits, we're not going to be thinking, oh, Should we stop on the runway? Should we continue? That's where there's big problems. General aviation typically doesn't have V1 speeds. You can make your own V1 speed, but typically it's not there for a light twin. When you hit V1 in the simulator, they cut one of the engines on you. And in some of these big turboprops, man, there's a lot of power being generated. And if you don't get right on it, it's gonna start rolling on you. So right at V1, where you're a slow speed, you need to step on the rudder and keep it right down the runway, lift off, and take care of the problem. This is where simulators and aviator training comes into play. Tonight we're going to talk about 3 things associated with attitude: desire, subconscious, and responsibility. So, in order to make that airplane fly and have a safe outcome with a degradation in performance of 80 to 90%, you've got to have the proper attitude. In an airplane, this is called attitude: a pitch up attitude and a pitch down attitude. What happens if we pitch up too high? We stall, don't we? The airflow, there's not enough airflow over the wing to keep the airplane flying, so it stalls and drops out of the sky. How do we correct for that?
Put your nose down.
Well, yeah, the very first thing we do is we lower the pitch attitude. We lower the nose. That's going to get that flow of air over the wing to keep the airplane flying. The second thing we do is power. If we don't have full power in, we put full power in. So again, we get that speed and the airflow to keep it flying. Now, in the twin-engine airplane, let's say we've got it under control and we're flying along with just barely climbing. I mean, when you lose that much performance, if you're loaded in a light twin, if you get 100 feet a minute climb, that's pretty good. But it's not pretty good because it's more than likely it's going to keep settling. You're not even going to be able to get a climb out of it. And you're already at a slow speed. So attitude is critical. If you pitch up a little bit too much and drop below a safe speed that's published for that situation, over you go. And again, that's where a lot of people get into trouble. They haven't practiced that, other than they had a check ride maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and they just don't practice it. And so consequently, when they get in that situation, just a slight pitch up at that slow speed can drop you below that safe speed, and over it goes. So attitude is absolutely critical. This is where, in aviator training, I love the simulator because you can show that, you can feel it, you can see it, you can visualize it. That's such a phenomenal way to learn. not only flying, but things about life. Attitude in life literally is everything. Number one, desire. Naturally, we desire to have the plane flying. You'd be surprised, but a lot of people that get into that situation panic and give up. They don't have a persistent desire to do what's right, to make it do what you want it to do. And in life, it's the same way. We have to have a burning desire if we want to be successful at anything. Let's talk about the next one. The next one is subconscious. Do you realize that we as human beings only use 1/10 of 1% of our brain power? Where's the other 99.9%? Well, some people have been able to tap into that and be highly successful. One of the books that taught me this probably 30, 40 years ago was a book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I would highly recommend that book. He spent his whole lifetime studying successful people and what things they did to be successful. Some of them are in aviator training. And again, the best way to learn these is learning to fly, in my opinion, and especially with the simulator. So subconscious, let's talk about that. In sports, if you've ever watched high-level sports, let's say tennis, for example, when they're going back and forth in tennis, do you think your finite mind up close to the net when you're hitting the ball back and forth, that your finite mind can react that quick? That's your subconscious. They've learned how to tap into their subconscious minds to be the highly successful athlete that they are. Any of these high-level athletes have learned how to tap into that subconscious mind. There's really only one way to tap into that mind. It's called autosuggestion. And if you don't get anything out of this session other than this is what I want to get across to you. Remember that whatever you put into your subconscious, positive or negative, it is going to work 24/7 to make that happen. And the more it goes in with emotion, that's when the subconscious gets powerful. So, if something happened that you were really fearful, that's a powerful emotion. If that's got into your subconscious, wow, that's a huge detriment. I see so many people putting negative suggestions into their mind, and I'm not talking about just positive thinking. That's not going to do it. Autosuggestion is actually putting something into your mind with emotion and with intention. That's where you can tap in to the power of your subconscious mind. Let me give you a quick example on that. I remember when I was raising a young family and had to do these check rides every 6 months. If you didn't pass, you were out. You get fired. That was my only skill early on. I counted on that to raise a family. There was a lot of pressure to perform. And when I would get in to that situation, wow, I would just tense up and do terrible. We talked about the V1 cuts. Man, this instructor used to love to do everything he could to make you crash, pile the pressure on you. And I remember doing these V1 cuts, and I knew what to do, but I still kept rolling upside down. In the airplane, I seemed to do really well. But man, when I'd get into that simulator, I'd just go to pieces. Well, the thing I discovered is I was using auto-suggestion. At that time, I didn't know what it was, but I was feeding my mind a lot of negative thoughts and a lot of fear going in that I can't do this. Why can't I perform this maneuver? Why do I crash every time they pull an engine on me? What's the deal? Well, I finally learned, number one, that there was a trick to fly in the simulator that I didn't know about, and the instructor wasn't about to tell us about it because he loved to watch you crash and watch you get frustrated. Now that's changed totally, but that's how they used to teach. They used to break you, pile everything they could on to break you so they could build you up. That's not the case anymore. It was determined years ago that that's not the way to teach. So when I got in with a different instructor, he pointed out, he said, Eldon, when you lose an engine, and they give you fog so you can't see outside, but he said, every time you lose an engine, there's enough visibility that you can see if the plane starts going off, you know what to do. Just feed in a little rudder. Don't panic. Just feed in a little bit of rudder and then go through your procedure. Man, that changed my whole check ride, especially when I finally realized what I was doing to my subconscious. And when I realized that I could teach my subconscious to not only not be nervous, but to perform at a high level, that was a huge discovery for me. My check rides from then on out were a blast to me. I loved them because it was showtime. I knew I could do it. And I knew that my subconscious knew how to do it. There's been times in sports that I've seen visually my subconscious kick in, that there is no other explanation for it. Now, a lot of people think, is this really true? Can you really tap into the brain power? Scientifically now, there is absolutely no question. If you learn auto-suggestion, you can train your subconscious to do anything you want it to do. I remember watching a television show where this guy took a bow and arrow and they flipped a bottle cap up. This guy would shoot the bottle cap out of the air. And I thought, how in the world could you do that with a bow and arrow? Well, there is no way you could do it with your conscious mind. But the subconscious, he trained himself to be able to do that instinctively. And when I learned how to shoot a bow, I didn't learn with sights. I learned, the guy that taught me didn't use sights. It was instinctive, what he'd call it. I would call it using your subconscious mind. You basically pull back and let your subconscious take over. Instead of sighting in, then you're using a lot of your finite mind. But man, this guy, a bottle cap would go up, he'd pull his bow back and just peg that thing out of the air. It was fascinating to me because that, again, was another witness to me how vitally important it is to train our subconscious. Now, what does this have to do with an airplane? If you've used your subconscious mind and trained it, when things go to pot, instead of panicking, you can methodically mixture, props, throttle, gear up, flaps up, identify, dead foot, dead engine, verify, feather, secure. You've just taken care of a big part of the problem with a multi-engine airplane. Because if this engine quits, the propeller is still, it's windmilling, and it's creating a ton of drag. It's like having a piece of plywood right there, just a ton of drag. Whereas when I went through that checklist, I feathered the engine, or the propeller, and it put the propeller like this so that I got rid of a lot of the drag. If I didn't do that, it would descend. There would be no way to maintain altitude, let alone a little bit of a climb. So you've got to do that just right, even to get a little bit of climb out of the plane or maintain level flight. So if you've trained your subconscious to do that, it's automatic. It's mixture, props, throttles, gear up, flaps up, identify, dead foot, dead engine, verify with the throttle, feather the prop, secure it with the mixture. That took, maybe 10 seconds? If you've got that into your subconscious and it takes over, you've got a big part of the battle won. The same thing in life. If you're not using that subconscious mind, you're cutting off a lot of success and a lot of opportunity. That's why I absolutely love aviation. Everything that's done there can be applied to life. We can learn so much. Desire, for example, subconscious mind, the last one, 100% responsible. Why is that a part of this equation of attitude? Well, how much do you know about the entitlement mentality these days? Man, that's created a huge problem in society. What do you think's caused that? Well, a big one is blaming others or expecting something for nothing or many things. In fact, let me read off a couple of them. Found it really interesting as I pulled this up. Blaming others, rationalizing, making excuses, Covering up. That's a big one these days. Fleeing from responsibility. Abandoning responsibility. Denying or lying. Rebelling. Complaining and murmuring. Finding fault and getting angry. All of these things are anti-responsibility. If you know what these are, and if you know how to use that subconscious mind to say, I am going to be 100% responsible. I don't care what anybody else is doing. I'm not entitled. I'm not blaming others. I'm the captain of this ship, of this airplane. I'm the captain of who I am and who I can be. And if I've made the conscious decision and have the desire to be 100% responsible, wow, that is a game changer in life and in aviation. I see too many pilots falling into what I just read to you, blaming others. Well, as a captain, the buck stops there. Again, that's what I love about aviation. It almost forces you to be 100% responsible. And in a simulator, you can teach this. As you learn to fly, you will learn how to become 100% responsible. If you don't, you're going to have problems in aviation and especially out of aviation. So that's why 100% responsible has everything to do with attitude. If we have a prideful attitude or an attitude of blaming others, we just add a little bit of nose-up attitude or nose-down attitude, and we don't get the performance out of the plane. In other words, if we're flying along on that one engine, just barely squeaking through the air, not climbing, not descending, and we make that little bit of change and go below that safe speed, there's not enough control to compensate for the torque of that engine rolling the airplane over. It's that critical to be 100% responsible. And again, learning that in life, especially you guys at a young age, oh, if you can learn that, you've put yourself right smack dab in the middle of opportunity and of success. So again, if you don't get anything out of what we talked about today, I hope you'll realize, and I hope you will spend some time learning about the subconscious mind and learning that being 100% responsible will make you highly successful. These principles we've talked about in and out of aviation are aviator principles of success. There's 21 of them. We talked about 3 of them last week, about what qualities you need to have, what attributes you need to have, truth. Why is it important to know truth? And again, we talked about some examples of this. Tonight we've talked about desire. A burning, persistent desire coupled with belief and purpose is what's required to have the proper attitude and become successful. Number 2, subconscious. Engage the subconscious mind with autosuggestion. Again, the only thing autosuggestion is for lack of a better word, tricking your subconscious mind to do what you want it to do. If I want to be a high-level athlete, I'm going to find something that I can put into my subconscious mind that's going to trick it, so to speak, and say, wow, this guy's serious. He wants to be a high-level tennis player. I'm going to go to work for him because he's convinced me that that's what he wants done. And in my mind, this is what's happening. It's releasing thousands of those little Pac-Men, and they're working for me 24/7 to accomplish what I've put into that subconscious with power, with emotion. Does that make sense? So, I hope you take that opportunity to do that. And whenever anything comes up negative, turn it into a positive. It can always be turned into a positive. Last one, again, we talked about 100% responsible. These are the three things, the three principles that if you master them, you'll be successful in aviation and in life. And again, just to reiterate, that's what's so cool about aviator training and about simulators. They can teach you these principles visually, hands-on. It uses all the learning techniques available to make it so that you can master them. And you really can, with a little bit of effort. This can be mastered to a high degree. Will you guys do that? Will you concentrate on those three things this week? If you do, you've already started the process of training your subconscious mind. Put it in there with power, with emotion. Say, I want to be a pilot. I want to be successful. I'm going to learn how to control you. I'm going to learn how to teach you what I want you to do because I know you're there. I know I'm only using a small portion. I know you control my breathing. I don't even have to think about it. You control everything in my body. I know you're powerful. I know you work for me 24/7. I'm going to tell you, I want you to do these things for me. If you'll do that, you're well on your way to tapping into the most powerful thing available to us. An extremely powerful tool. So I hope you do that. I hope you come back next week, because next week we're going to talk about some fun stuff as well. Planning the vision, utilizing a process called the PPA flight plan principles. By working with what we've talked about here, and this is building on it, you can build a vision that you can give that subconscious mind by following a process called the PPA process that will help enhance your ability to tap into your subconscious mind. So we'll send out or Russ will send out a email and a text for the next session. I hope everybody will join us. Thanks for being here tonight.
Just for
when I was recording. Thank you, Eldon. Let's give one more hand. That was good. Some good information on airplane attitude and personal attitude. Just a little quiz for you guys. So this is your pitch, right? Now what's this? This is yaw. Just like a horse. Yaw, right? And then what's this? Roll. So what are some attitudes that you can have in life? Some good attitudes, some bad attitudes? Any ideas? Yeah, what would be an example of having a good attitude? There you go. Sounds like that was a recent experience maybe that you had. What about you guys? You see some good attitudes? These guys are all my boys. So do you guys see any good attitudes and bad attitudes in our house?
Yeah.
We've got a little both. What are some good attitudes and some bad attitudes?
Bad attitudes, we like to compare a lot. And then good attitudes, I guess. Sometimes we'll help each other.
Yeah. Benji?
Kind of what he said. Sometimes we fight, and sometimes we play with each other.
Yeah. Yep. Nathan? You're pretty happy-go-lucky. You just have a good attitude generally, most of the time. So we won't take too much time here, but let me tell you about a time I had an attitude of pride. This is probably what I consider my professional life, my worst professional moment in my career. This is when I was still fairly young, so I'd only been out of school maybe 4 years or so. And we were at a company. I do finance, so we do finance and accounting and financial systems. And I was in a meeting where, as a group, we were making a decision on what we were going to do on a new financial system. And there was kind of two groups in this meeting. You had the finance guys, we were on one side of the table, and you had the IT guys on the other side of the table. And we had kind of opposing views on how to go about this, because if we went the way the finance guys wanted to go, that was going to be a lot of work for the IT guys. And if we went the way the IT guys wanted to go, that was going to be a lot of work for us finance guys. But we were young, we were smart, we were cocky, and I was doing the PowerPoint presentation for the meeting that we were going through. So we were going through different slides, kind of discussing the pros and cons and whatnot. And so we had a screen like this. I was on my computer, and I was sharing my screen here, going through these slides. And we kept going and got to the end of the meeting, and we finally made the decision, like, okay, this is the way we're going to go. And this was in favor of our team, the finance group. So this is going to make our jobs easier, going to make the IT guys' jobs a lot harder, and one guy in particular. And when we made that decision, you could see this particular IT individual that was going to bear the brunt of this work. He kind of like, he was willing to do it. We kind of conceded that it was the right decision, but you could kind of tell he wasn't happy about it. And me and a coworker that were good friends, we have instant message on our computers. We're communicating a lot that way. And so I popped up my instant message because we could all kind of see this reaction on this gentleman's face. And I typed, "Boy, he sure wasn't happy about that, was he?" And then my other friend pointed out to me, he said, "Hey, Russ, yeah, thanks for sharing your thoughts with us." And everyone could see that I was having this little side conversation with my coworker to the detriment of this other individual who was going to be our team member in this effort. And you could see where that really put a damper on things. And so you had a situation where my attitude of pride really made this difficult situation. I had to humble myself a little bit and come in the next day, came in early and sat down and had a one-on-one discussion with this individual and apologized to them. But our attitudes can affect us a lot of different ways in our lives. They can affect us to have a successful outcome. They can affect us to have a not successful outcome. Now, fast forward several years, and I've learned that making your team members successful and putting them in the spotlight and saying, look, a good job they've done, versus putting yourself, that's a much better way to go. And just about a month ago, I was sitting down with a team member that reports to me, and we do kind of quarterly reviews. And she said, you're probably, in all my career, you're probably tied with one other boss that I've had in terms of how great it is to work for him. And so that was a great compliment. And, I think that was the result of a better attitude. So anyways, that's a little bit of my own wisdom I'll impart on you guys. Is there any other ideas or thoughts before we close out on attitude? Anything? Okay. We're almost done, but Zach, you took a group of your homeschool class on a little tour of the airport. Do you want to take just a couple minutes and talk about that and share about that experience, what you learned and what it was like? Okay. Here, go ahead and take the microphone.
Okay, well, so I teach this homeschool class in our homeschool co-op we do, and I had the opportunity to take them to the airport because of a guy I knew, and we he took us into a hangar, and we got to look at some planes, and he taught us how they worked, and we got to sit in them, and then we went on the apron of the airport, which is kind of where, it's like the parking lot of the airport where all the airplanes park.
Apron, it's called?
Yeah, the apron. And then, so he showed us some planes out there, and we got to watch some airplanes take off and land. And yeah, I guess we got to sit in an airplane too. And then it was really good, I feel like, for the youth, because, it was really exciting for me too. You don't get very many opportunities like that to go see what an actual airport looks like and operates. And then we were on our way back to the parking lot to leave, and we got special permission to go take a tour of a C-130, which is it's a Air Force turboprop cargo plane. And it was just it was taking a little stop there. It was heading back west somewhere. I think it was in Georgia. And it was just really cool. It was a really new plane, so we got to see inside it, see what the cargo bay looked like, what the cockpit looked like, and I was just
Did you get to meet the pilots?
we didn't get to meet the pilots. We got to meet some of the drop crew, which is the guys that work on the cargo, and they were really nice people. They work with the Air National Guard, which is kind of a branch of the Air Force, and yeah, it was really kind of cool to meet them and see what the plane looked like. So that was just I guess the cherry on top for the entire tour.
Did it make you more want to be a pilot, or were you like, oh, maybe this job isn't as cool as I thought?
I don't know if it really changed anything about me being a pilot. Ever since I was 10, I was really set on being a pilot. So I guess it was just like a reassure that I should be a pilot.
Did you get to talk to anyone that's aircraft pilot or aircraft mechanic? Did they talk to you about that at all? Aircraft maintenance?
We kind of got to talk to them a little bit, the guys that were working on the plane, but not much. The guy that gave us the tour, he was a private pilot, but he didn't do very much of the maintenance. He kind of gave us a run through of the engine though, and taught us how it worked.
They're rebuilding the plane, right?
Yeah.
All right. So do you think they'll let us take our group through there sometime?
Maybe. There's a good chance.
Can you arrange for a C-30 to show up?
No, I don't think so. We just got lucky.
What's that? That's awesome.
Yeah.
And they were just stopped up for a few hours, probably?
They came like a day or two before, but we got to tour, and right as we were getting out of the plane, they said they're doing the pre-flight check right before they'd go.
That's cool.
So
That's cool. Lucky.
we just barely caught them.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Thanks everyone. Thanks for being here. Any questions for Eldon while we've got him here, or?
Brisbane gets to go for his first flight there next week.
Oh, awesome.
Where you going? So what's a good thing to know if you're flying to Hawaii? Like how to swim or anything?
I recommend just bring a jacket on your crew. You don't know how they don't really have heaters in airplanes, so it's kind of cold.
Yeah. When you get up high, I always like to travel with a sweater or something when you're flying, because it can get a little bit cold on the airplane, especially if you got the window seat.
I just like wear like my normal clothes and just do snow angels.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like when I got back from basketball game, I just took a fresh air and just laid in the snow.
Yeah. It's cool. Taking a flight like that, you realize just how big the Earth is and how small and kind of insignificant you are. It's cool. You can, if it's not cloudy, you can look down, even though you're 20, 30,000 feet, you can kind of see these little tiny waves in the ocean. And yeah, yeah. And when I flew into Hawaii, I don't know if it's still the right time of year, but in certain times of year, there's tons of humpback whales that come in during certain times of the year. And as you're coming in, look down as you're getting close to coming into land. You might be able to see them in the water. I remember seeing some. It was pretty cool. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. You have a window seat. Do you know? Okay. Okay. Cool. That's exciting. Yeah. Well, we want you to report back to us next meeting, okay? Let us know how it goes. Okay. Cool. Cool. Awesome. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.